Welcome to episode 115 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to South African rower turned Surfski world champion, Hayley Nixon. Good afternoon, Hayley. How are you doing today?
Hey Adam, thanks very much. All good this side in Durban, but great to be on the show and privileged. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you for joining us. We were just chatting now. You're in Durban and you're wearing a jacket. What's going on?
Yeah, as I said, and obviously you brought it up, don't judge me. I'm a bit of a ninny in the cold. And I will admit that I have jeans and Ugg boots on as well. But it's chilly in Durbs. There's a massive west coming through, which is bringing the cold front. So I think I have an excuse to be cold.
Durban guys struggle when it goes below anything 20, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Hayley, tell us a bit about your story. You started off as a rower. I believe you started rowing in uni, and then you got onto the kayaking and surfski. What were you doing before rowing?
Yeah, so I had a bit of an interesting story. I actually started off swimming, and that was my big passion at school. That's why when I saw you post that you'd interviewed Penny Haynes, I was all excited. I think as a youngster, she was my idol. She's still to this day when people say like, who's your idol? I'm kind of like, I don't really know, but I've always liked Penny Haynes. She was a breaststroker and I was a young breaststroker. But yeah, so I started out in swimming, and then it's actually quite interesting. Like I didn't make it easy for myself. I think most people find they're quite talented at a sport and then pursue that, and then maybe over time it works out. But I was quite a good swimmer with probably had potential. And then I sort of dropped the ball there and then went to uni and found rowing, and then got pretty good at rowing, and the Olympics almost happened. And then, when Olympics didn't happen and I kind of came home to lick my wounds, I thought, well, I guess that's it. I must get a real job now and be an adult. And then I found kayaking, and then everything worked out. So it's been an interesting path over, I suppose, 15 years, I guess, of being an athlete as an adult.
And obviously all water sports. I've watched a few Durban guys, Graham Hill and a couple of the swimmers. Why are there so many good swimmers that come from Durban? Other than the fact that you guys are at the sea, I mean, it's not as if you go training in the sea. It's an amazing fact that Durban seems to produce the best of South African swimmers.
I think it's a culture here in Durban. Every school has swimming. I remember my dad telling me that I was swimming before I could walk. It's just a thing in Durbs, and maybe even as a family and friend groups, you would have a bra around the pool, so the kids would be in the pool. So I think we just all learned to swim. Like I wasn't very involved in the ocean, but yeah, I literally was swimming laps, and I think even swimming laps underwater before I was 5 years old or whatever. So it is a freakish thing about Durbs, and I think we've got a good coaching system, a good nurturing system that takes kids towards swimming. But in some ways now I look back and I shake my head because I think, why aren't these kids paddling? Because paddling could be as accessible, and it's such a tiny sport. So it's a good thing, but maybe it sort of overshadows some of the other sporting potential as well. But it is a very good feeder sport, I think, to any other sport. So it's, there's no harm done in it.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned you dropped the ball in swimming. Tell us a bit about that. What happened?
Yeah, so I went to boarding school when I was 11, up at St. Mary's in Kloof. And, we had a good swimming system there. I did well. I swam for sort of Durban and districts. I think I swam for KZN for a while. But as a boarder, we weren't allowed to leave school premises. So I was quite restricted. I used to train with Alistair as a youngster, but all of that sort of had to stop. And I sort of got to a stage where my school coach said to me, you really need to be in the pool with a better coach, with the Graham Hills of the world or something like that. And unless you can leave boarding school, that's obviously not allowed. So that never happened. So I did my best to compete, once or twice a week with the training I had at school versus my competitors, and did quite well. And then maybe naively, I sort of thought, well, when I leave school, I'll really get into it at university. I'll swim and see what happens. But I applied for Rhodes and UCT and got into both. And at the last minute chose Rhodes because of the degree I wanted, and got to Rhodes and found that there was about one person swimming, no coach, no swimming team in existence. And I remember thinking, like, you absolute chop, like this was your passion was swimming, and you've come to a place where, you may as well be in the desert. So, but then, yeah, as it worked out, my brother had been a good rower, and he'd said to me, Rhodes University are the best rowing university in the country. You must try rowing. And so I did, and then so began the rowing journey.
My sister went to Rhodes, and I went to visit her a few times. I was a little bit younger. Other than being the best rowers, they certainly had an amazing drinking culture and partying culture.
Oh
When did you
no.
find time to study and row and do the Rhodes thing?
Yeah, so I like to be honest. Rowing had this funny reputation at Rhodes where they were quite worshipped, the rowers, and quite respected for like a 6 months on, 2 months of debauchery, 4 months on. You know what I mean? Like it was amazing. Like we used to. So Dorney Lecture University started at 7:45, I think. So we would leave campus at 4 a.m., drive to Port Alfred, row for an hour, drive back, and make the Dorney. And that's kind of what the rowers prided themselves on, is like they would focus hard on boat race, which was the be all and end all. And then after boat race, you could excuse them for any of their behavior because that had been their commitment. So yeah, I do get mocked all the time that I must have like a poor liver by now. But no, we were good. We had a balance.
And did you sort of fall seamlessly into rowing? Because it seems as if you picked it up quite quickly, having not really competed in the sport before.
Yeah, so I was quite lucky then. I think one of the attributes has always been that I'm tall and I'm strong. I'm not quite 6 foot, but I'm almost there. And I'm like a typical mesomorph. I'm pretty muscular, so I always had strength behind me. And the reason I got into the rowing team is that I obviously arrived there, and they took me in for their sort of trials. They used to do a 2K ergo trial just to initiate everyone at the beginning of the year. And I got on the machine I'd probably been on it a handful of times, and I think I pulled one of the best times. It immediately placed me in the top 8. And I remember the captain at the time saying, "I don't care how she rows, she's getting in the boat, we'll teach her." And yeah, so I think that was, I could apply the brawn, and then it just became a case of trying to learn the skill and the experience. And I was always a quick learner, and I think a keen learner, and quite OCD in my commitment. So that helped.
And you rode pairs and scull. Um, how did you sort of adapt to having to really time and partner with a bunch of other girls? Because again, having not started much earlier, it must have taken a little bit of time to get your timing in.
Yeah, so we at Rhodes we mainly rowed 8s and 4s, so it was very much crew rowing, and it was relentless. I mean, I think we were on the water almost every day. We used to spend 3-week training camps, training twice a week on the Kayak. So your learning curve had to be quite quick. But I think the real hard work and the real technical work, and where my sort of weaknesses showed through, was when I moved up to Pretoria and kind of joined the national scene. Then you put into small boats, into single sculls and pairs, and you're told you can't hide in the 8 in the middle. You've got to now get in a single and make the boat work. And that took a lot of time for me, and I have no doubt that's part of the reason why I didn't eventually make the pair, is that I probably still didn't have the finesse that a small boat needed, but maybe always had the lungs and the legs. So yeah, it was extremely difficult, and it's the same thing with my paddling, where I think some of these women have been racing in the ocean since they were nippers, since they were 15, 13. I come in as a 30-year-old. You need some humble pie, and you've got to learn fast.
And you rode for SA, I mean, and for a number of years. Was there a highlight during that time? Obviously, you missed out on London, and we'll get to that. But over that period, was there a sort of real highlight for you in terms of your rowing career?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's many, and it's not necessarily one race. One of the highlights was we did this month-long tour where we raced 2 World Cups. We raced in Munich, and then we spent a week racing in training in Greece on the Athens Olympics course. And that was just mind-blowing to know that, that's where Ramon and Don had won their Olympic medal, those years back. And that whole experience of myself and Leanne, who I was rowing with at the time, were both very new to the system. So we'd raced our first World Cup together in Munich. We were now on this amazing training camp in Greece, and then we were going to the next World Cup in like the rowing Mecca, which is in Switzerland. So I mean, that whole month, like as hectic as it was, I mean, we trained ourselves to the death on that tour. But I learned so much. So I think that was a gigantic highlight. Yeah, and I think I raced a world champs in the single. My final world champs was actually in the single scull. The pair had already been sort of selected a year in advance, well, at least for that qualification regatta. So I was put into the single. And as scary as it was, I mean, it was an honor, like to race for your country at a world championships in a single scull, just you. It was pretty special. I didn't do exceptionally well, but it was, you know, they can't take away from me that I was on the line there, which is awesome.
And Hayley, having chatted to Sean Keeling, the rowing setup's quite brutal in terms of whoever's the strongest at that point gets the spot. So essentially, you could have qualified South Africa for the Olympics, and then you kind of miss out because someone else has picked up that spot. It's quite a pull to swallow.
Yeah, and I was on the good side of that pull. So so I can speak from like experience of both sides. You know, it's a clever system because you qualify the spot, but then you have to stay current. There's no slacking off or complacency. And that was sort of my only opportunity, was to get in the boat, was to try and outdo the two that had qualified. But I see from their perspective as well, like, you know, every day must have been tough for them, knowing that they might have gotten that close and then I was going to walk in and try and take it away. And I do think I think it's right, because I think otherwise your system could fall apart a bit. The people that didn't make it might just disappear. And then heaven forbid something happened to one of your athletes and now there's no one in the, you know, kind of in the side waiting. It's a very scary position, and it is brutal. I think Sean would have expressed that as well. I mean, he went through it with the second Olympics as well.
And I mean, Sean mentioned that they were all mates and they were all close, but it's got to kind of put a little bit of a wedge between the athletes, having, you know, you're all still competing against each other, even though you're representing South Africa.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're not robots. You're all emotional. You're trying to have connections and bonds because you spend so much time together. But at the end of the day, you're also there because you're athletes, not necessarily best friends. There's always very special relationships. Like, I think one of the hardest parts about actually when I left was like the breakup with a family of 15. You know, like these rowers that you'd spent the better part of 2 or 3 or 4 years with. But of course, and you know, the other side of the coin is like, oh, she's looking a bit sick today. Okay, you know, I might have a chance. Or you're trying to beat your mates on the rowing machine or on the single scull trial, but then an hour later, you guys are sharing single beds next to each other and watching, you know, How I Met Your Mother. So it's hectic. You learn a lot of life skills on like how to leave it on the water.
And London was a big disappointment. You kind of swiftly gave up rowing after that. Tell us what happened and why it was such a big impact on you.
Yeah, it's I guess it's just the age-old story of thinking you deserve the position and then not getting it and then having to swallow that bitter pill. I mean, I've had I don't know, 10 years, however long it's been now, to process it. And you know, at the end of the day, it's the coach's decision. And I think I just really battled because I had been in the boat. I'd had to get out because of surgery. I'd been given a list of sort of prerequisites as to how I would get myself back in the boat. And upon meeting all of them, I still wasn't allowed back in the boat. And that killed me. I was sort of like, you know, as an athlete, you think everything's very quantitative, like tick X, Y, and Z box, and then it works out. But I know now that it's, especially as you mentioned earlier, in a crew boat where it's so much about dynamics and moving together and the relationship together. And it's not as black and white as you think, and it's not as black and white as I wanted to believe. So when they sort of said to me, oh, thanks, you did do all of that, but actually you didn't do it by enough, or we're still not quite happy with it, you're not going. I was just like, well, you guys are kidding me. Like you dangled the carrot, I got it, but you know, you didn't put it far enough, you keep changing it. Yeah. So I don't like hold it against them. I mean, they had to make a decision that was best for the country, that was best for the crew. I think they hoped I would stay on. And you know what, they might have been right. Maybe I would have been better in a single and I should have stayed on another 4 years and maybe things would have happened in the single. But I was 28. I was kind of I was still living off my parents, and they sort of said to me, enough's enough. Are we going to go through this for another 4 years? Like, maybe you should get a real job. So sad, but true.
And I mean, you left rowing, but you found kayaking and surfski. Do you feel the rowing has helped you in terms of your surfski? Because I mean, you've really blown the lights out since you kind of switched disciplines.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I credit rowing every single time I get asked a question along these lines. I think maybe I should start telling the athletes that I coach that they should all get rowing machines and they should spend 10 years on a rowing machine and then become paddlers. I have no doubt. I've never trained as ruthlessly, as hard, as mentally, as consistently as I did when I was rowing. I'm sure I listened to your chat with Sean, and he also touched on it a little bit. I mean, the training camps we had, most of the time we were training 3 times a week. So there's no doubt in my mind that when I moved to paddling, I was very, very lucky that I came with this sort of physiology package that was already primed and ready. And then to put that onto a kayak and to hopefully trying to learn the skill is sort of all I needed to do. And I wouldn't have had that had it not been for rowing. So I owe it a massive part of where I've come in the paddling world.
But yet the sort of motion of paddling against the motion of rowing is quite different. And I would imagine uses, other than your core, uses very different muscles.
Yeah, so it's chalk and cheese, but it's similar biomechanics. So I was terrible when I started. Like I could barely paddle 100 meters without falling out. I was the laughing stock of Durban Blue Lagoon where we train. Like they just used to call me the swimmer. Like no one cared to learn my name because I was so terrible. And I was mortified because I think like most people, I tried to get into a fast boat instead of just being humble and getting in a slow boat and learning. It was difficult. I mean, in rowing, I was quite used to the balance beams of 2 oars on either side. You're obviously going backwards. Now suddenly you're in quite a skinny boat and there's nothing on the water. You up here and then you might tap on this side, but you fall this way. So cheapers, it took me a long time to get that. And I'm actually still mocked to this day that my stability is not that good. But yeah, so that was the hardest part, was like, I was also very like mentally frustrated because I knew I was strong and I knew I was fit. And I was like, who's this little 16-year-old, 45-kilo creature that's beating me and making me look stupid? Like, how is she staying up in the boat? Yeah, so there was a lot of that for the first 6 months. And, but again, and I credit this, at that stage, I was being coached by Hank's dad, Lee. And Lee said to me, he'd heard my story and he was quite excited. He said, no, come, we can do something special. And he said, but you need to get on the water 7 days a week for, the next year. He even said to me, you need to do the Berg River Canoe Marathon. And I was like, I can't even sit in a canoe yet. You want me to go 240 Ks on the Paarl River? And he was like, yeah, in 4 days, you would have done more training than most people have done in a month. So that's the approach I took. I just got on the water every day for the next 4 years and things worked out,
Your husband must have been chuffed being a sort of big fisherman. He obviously had lots of extra time to go fishing while you were paddling.
Yeah, everyone mocks us about that because Paul would go off for like 6 hours fishing, but it wouldn't matter because he didn't have a grumpy wife because I was out training and then I came home to fresh fish. So he prides himself on the fact that he fed me into becoming a world champion. So it was a good balance.
And Hayley, what sort of clicked or what changed to get you to the level that you are? I mean, you hadn't been in long, and by 2016, you were already the world Surfski champ. I mean, that's a hell of a rise. Yeah. And for someone that's on the sort of wrong side of 30.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened. I mean, I guess maybe I just got lucky with how things were. So 2016 was a bit of a breakthrough for me because I won the World Series. There's normally like 6 races and they take your top 4 results and I'd just raced enough. I mean, I guess I was smart about when and where I raced. I sort of said, well, if you want to be up for this, you need to race as many races as you can. So that's what I did and did well enough in all of them. And when I won the series, then suddenly people were like, oh, okay, this is a nobody who's won the series. And that set me up to compete more in 2017, which was the year of actual world champs. And I think I caught myself a little bit off guard, but I think also, like I said earlier, I already had this training in me and I had this ability to throw like a lot of hard work and brawn at the equation. And that got me quite far. I wasn't, and I'm still not the most skillful paddler, but I think I've, from rowing and maybe from the setbacks I'd had, I was just pretty tough and pretty stubborn.
And I mean, Hayley, you've had some pretty remarkable results, and excuse my ignorance, but I'm not much of an ocean guy. Um, you've done K2, you've done kayak, and you've done surfski. Is there a variation
Mm.
between them all, or is it kind of much of a muchness?
Yeah, so the two I've competed in on like a world champs level are canoe marathon and then ocean kayak or surf ski. And you could probably compare them to road cycling versus mountain biking. It's it's still a kayak, but they require different skill sets. So canoe marathon I've done mainly in a K2. So I've always had a partner for that. I think I've done 4 world champs in K2. And that's very much it's a 4K course. It's what Hank does. I know you've spoken to Hank. It's that loop section, very strategic, bunch riding, breakaways, smart on the portages. And then surfski racing was obviously the mountain biking. So it's the waves and utilizing the wind, and it's generally from A to B, and it's getting through the shore break, etc., etc. So they're quite different, but they've always complemented each other very well, given the nature of the distance. They're both anywhere from an hour 40 to 2.5 hours. They're long endurance races. And again, from starting out training with the McGregors were so passionate about marathon that we all got into marathon, and then I eventually broke away and specialized in surf ski.
And do you have a preference between the two?
Yeah, definitely surf ski from a fun perspective. I find it challenging in different ways. I find it harder in other ways. Every day is different on the ocean. And I mean, even in my results, most of my sort of earlier results, even world champs in 2017, it was flat as a lake. It may as well have been a marathon race. And people sort of insulted me a bit. Well, not insulted, but sort of said, oh, well, it was only because it was flat that Hayley won. And that's what surf ski is like. It's, it could be dead flat on one day, and it could be upside down, 6-meter swell, 30 knots the next day. So I always found that with surf ski, you had to have quite a few skills because you didn't know what conditions you would get on the day. Whereas marathon is like track cycling. It's, it's lap after lap. It's much more consistent. I think it requires a different kind of mental toughness and skill and experience. So I've just found more satisfaction in the surf ski.
And I mean, you mentioned your results. You have had sort of incredible results. You won the SA Champs in 2019. You came second in the World Champs, I believe, in 2019 as well. What's left for you to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel very grateful. Like I often reflect on this. So I'm actually pregnant at the moment, and it was quite a big decision to, do we do this? And I said to Paul, like, I'm so satisfied. Like it's been such a great 5 years. I think as an athlete, you always want more. You want to win another world champs. You want to win another World Series. But in the same breath, I've been stung before, and I'm kind of like, well, maybe it's good just to feel good about what you've done so far and not necessarily need more or want more. I'm still tempted. I still want to race. I just think because I love racing and because I don't want to just not race. But there's some burning desire. I think for me, the two highlights were Molokai and then obviously World Champs. So I have ticked those boxes. I don't think I have 10 or 12 Molokais in me like Oscar and Hank. I don't think I can keep going back to win like that. So for me, it's more about the next chapter. Like, do we coach now? Do we mentor? How do we get other athletes? How do we get more women? Because that's what I struggled with when I started. Like, there just weren't enough women, and we weren't enough in the picture. So that's been the goal now. And I think that's what I'll probably focus on moving forward.
And Hayley, I've asked a couple of athletes in, I suppose, what we could call the smaller sports. Do you feel that you received the recognition that you've deserved, being a world champion, having won the World Series? Because to be perfectly honest, in my opinion, no. And much the same for a lot of other world champions in other smaller disciplines. I just don't feel you guys are receiving the recognition you deserve.
So I'll answer your question straight out, and then I'll maybe argue why. I think I agree with you, no, but I think I understand why, and I think it's because we are a small sport. Like at the end of the day, who really cares about the Surfski world champion? And it's such a funny thing because I think you could win an Olympic medal in another sport, and that would seem, you could win the bronze medal, and that would still always be better than a gold at world champs for Surfski. Or you could win a football, I don't know, league, and it would probably still always be better because those are mainstream sports. And, you know, maybe that's a fault of the system, but it is what it is. You know, no one's paying big money to watch our sport on TV, so sponsors maybe aren't getting what they need from it. It's hard. It's not something that I'm bitter about. It's just unfortunate because we've worked really, really hard to get where we are. I don't think we've worked any less hard than the average rugby or soccer player. You know, but by nature of the sport we chose, we are never going to make a living out of it, and we've always had to work full time, and we've always had to juggle all these things. So it's been quite an impossible task. And yeah, so I think from that way it's been frustrating, and I think it's also what's made me quite passionate about the female side of things, because I think there's, like I said, I mean, David's wife Nikki is probably the best paddler South Africa's ever seen, but she would have struggled an even more difficult system than what I had to struggle now. So I don't want to see that happen for women of the future. So we need to change it, because otherwise the sport's not going to grow for us, you know. But it is what it is, and people like you are putting us on the map, so thank you.
Trying to. And in hindsight, Hayley, do you now look back in terms of rowing thinking, oh, it was actually a good decision to hang up your paddles or oars or whatever, because of what you've achieved in other disciplines of surfski and canoeing?
Oh, 100%. Like I do. It's not a cliche to me. I really think things happen for a reason. I'm grateful to rowing for what it taught me and what it did. And absolutely, like I'm much happier now than I ever was rowing. I was happier from the first second. I think I returned to Durban and I got into a Surfski. I just thought, this feels right. I think this is where I was meant to be. So yeah, absolutely, it worked out. It's coming home, I met Paul. Coming home, I started paddling. You know, all these things did work out, which may not have been that way had I continued rowing. But I'll always be sad that I never made an Olympics. I still now think, you know, what if it's in the next Olympics? Like, can I come back in my 40s or, you know, whatever? But whatever. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not unhappy with how things have turned out. I'm very grateful.
And Hayley, what does Hayley do away from the sea and the boats and the kayaks? And what do you do just to chill? It can't be
To chill.
more. Yeah, it can't be more paddling, surely.
No. Yeah, I don't know. I think we're pretty simple when it comes to that. We're very game farm people. You can see big Ellies in the background. Paul was actually a game ranger when I met him, and my family have grown up on game farms up in Zululand. So that's probably our chill time. We like to get away to the bush. And yeah, I guess of late Paul's been taking me out fishing, so maybe I'm going to become a fishing wife at some stage. Yeah, and then I think just work. Like I've always been involved in sports. I've been a biokineticist as an adult, and now I do a lot of online coaching. So kind of always revolving around sport, and I suppose I'll put more effort into that now moving forward.
And life's obviously going to change in a couple of months' time. From the lessons that you've learned through sport, will you be a big ambassador for your child to be involved in sport in some form, whether it be surfski or rowing or swimming or table tennis?
Look, I certainly hope she's sporty. So hard to tell. I think every parent is like, I'll let my child do what they want to do, but I'll definitely put her in the pool and hope she swims. Yeah, I mean, look, we'll promote the lifestyle. Like Paul and I are both avid outdoor enthusiasts. So whether it's like walking up a mountain or trying to help her qualify for an Olympics, who knows? It would be incredible. But yeah, I just hope that she's as active and as keen to be in the outdoors and to be sporty like we are. But I'm not going to jinx it, because we might just get a really cute little book nerd who wants to be a librarian, and I guess we'll have to be okay with that.
Yeah, I was chatting to a few mates last night, and Egaming is now just becoming so much bigger, and it's apparently being looked at for the Olympics. And I mean, to me, it's a very different discipline completely. But I don't think a child can learn much about themselves other than through sport. To me, whether it's a team sport, an individual sport, I think a person can learn an incredible amount about themselves and, you know, how to grow.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like whether it's individual or team, I think play is important. That's probably what I'd like to see, is that like we introduce our child to like having fun playing a sport. if it then gravitates towards becoming competitive and serious, then so be it. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But certainly, like even with boarding school, just the social dynamic that came with being on the sports field all the time, being in the pool, playing hockey, playing netball. Like I heard Penny saying she did every sport that the school offered, and I was the same. Like every term was a different sport. My poor parents had to buy so many, you were probably the same, we had every sports racket in the world in the garage. But yeah, I guess that's good. And I'm glad I didn't specialize from too young an age, because I think I would have missed out on that. So I hope that continues for our children.
Well, may it. Hayley, it's been great chatting to you today on Sport SA Daily Diary. Thank you for your time. Let's hope we'll see Junior Nixon in a boat one day or on a top Olympic step, and we'll certainly be on the watch out.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Thanks so much for your time. It was awesome.
Catch us again tomorrow on Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to a young South African who's making a name for himself in the sport of BMX.